Well, here we are. We're leaving New York. Uh, didn't really stay or get to go anywhere or watch anything. I basically just wanted to go by the Statue of Liberty and see that. That was the only thing I actually was interested in. There's really nowhere to tie up anywhere either in New York. Everything is so busy, and every piece of property is owned by somebody. So they didn't. I didn't see any like a lot of municipal cities have, free docks and stuff like that, so you can walk around and all of this. But I didn't see anything like that around here. Uh, it was pretty rough uh, leaving New York, uh, mainly because the winds were a little high. It was drizzling when I left, and also the ferries. There was two or three different ferries going up and down on the left and the right side. I mean, you can't see them there, but one was coming, one was going, and there was three or four of them all at one time. So, but the reason I left is because I figured, once I get out of New York, the Hudson River should be a lot better. It should be nice and calm. It should calm down anyway. Uh, Here I am, uh, past New York already, and I'm going down the Hudson River, and as you can see, the water has calmed down quite a bit. Uh, it's nice and smooth. It's still drizzling a little bit, but the winds are not pushing the boat all over the place like they were when I was in New York City. So it's the mouth of the Hudson River really that causes, because the water from the Atlantic is coming in through the mouth of Hudson River there. That's why you have the turbulence and the added, there were tons of barges and everything going up and down in New York. So it's a busy harbor. You have to be careful and you have to watch out because everybody's trying to pass everybody, and everybody's creating a wake also. So, but it didn't take long. Right after I went past Manhattan, I started seeing this, and the waters were nice and calm, like I said earlier, and the wind was blowing, but not bad. Uh, the drizzle you can still see is kind of cloudy. That was the morning basically, and then it cleared up some. But one thing I didn't expect to see, when I talk about when I used to talk about the Hudson River, the first thing that used to come in my mind, because I've never been on the Hudson River, was New York City and the stories about all these stories that you hear about the Hudson River, that you do something wrong with the mafia or something, you're gonna find yourself in the Hudson River, floating in the Hudson River. So the Hudson River wasn't that dirty like I was thinking it was gonna be. It was actually okay. It was all right. Uh, Now, when I got further out though, out of New York, I started, kind of watching that. The further out I went on the further up I went on the Hudson River, the better the waters got. And I thought, that's probably the way it was going to be for quite a ways. Uh, Here is Yonkers, New York. I decided to do a 360 here so you could see some of the buildings and stuff like that. And like I said, this was Yonkers, New York. Here shortly, way back there, you can kind of see part of New York still back there, but that was about it. But one of the things that surprised me about the Hudson River was this mountain ranges that are around here. It's very spectacular view. I mean, it's amazing. It amazed me because I'm not used to seeing this kind of hills and mountain ranges and all of this. Florida's all flatland. We don't have none of this stuff here. And again, you're on the Hudson River, and that wasn't my picture of this is the Hudson River. So I was impressed, and I loved it. It's beautiful looking as you're going in, one mountain range after another mountain range. And obviously, because of these mountain ranges, sooner or later, you're going up on elevation. Okay, right now we're still at sea level here, but the further in I go, that's why you have these locks that'll take you up higher elevations and bring you up. Every time you go through the lock, it brings you up more and more and more. But for right now, just going down the Hudson River, you can see the mountain ranges in the background. I mean, they were all beautiful. I mean, it was amazing. I hadn't seen this kind of mountain ranges, and didn't expect to see them because I'm being from Florida, we don't have this kind of stuff. We don't also either have a lot of rocks and formations like they have here. Everything apparently they said there's rocks on the bottom of the river here, so you have to be careful. What we have in Florida is sand. If you run aground, no big deal. You run aground here, it could cause some problems, serious problems. But even the rock formations and everything that were carved out of here looked very impressive. I mean, I wanted to get closer to these things so I could film it a little bit better, but I was afraid there might be some rocks and stuff like that. So it was best that I just stay in the channel and make sure, as long as I'm in the channel, you're pretty much safe. Like I said before in other tapes, they take care of the channel pretty good. Here was an interesting building. Looked like a castle, or it was a castle at one time or another. Now it looks like somebody's converted it into office buildings or something like that, because the windows are more modern than what you would expect to see on a building like this. You could see they were the two-pane windows, so they didn't have two-pane windows in the old days when they put this together. But here's a shot of some of the mountain ranges. What I did is I just took a 360 around the boat so you could see all the different beautiful mountain ranges that they had out here. And it's pretty amazing to me. It was to see something like this, and I think that was the idea behind the trip. Not necessarily to visit and write down everything about making the trip, but just being able to see stuff and see the difference. I've talked to a lot of people, and let me tell you, there's a lot of good people in this world. Some of them think I was crazy because, it's a 22-foot boat and a 90 horsepower motor, outboard motor on it. But other than that, some of them were pretty impressed that, I was doing the trip. But I'm not the first one to do this kind of trip on this kind of boat, okay? I've seen a lot of YouTube videos about people making the loop with these 22-foot cdories. Here's where I dropped anchor, right next to this little marina here. And some advice to give somebody when you're out there: don't drop anchor next to a train station. They have trains that run along the river, both on the right side and on the left side. On the right side, like this one here, this is a commuter trains. They come in, stop, people get on, get off, takes off again. Well, that's fine and dandy, but I dropped anchor here. I could hear the screeching of the brakes all night long, and then I could hear the revving of the motor coming up, taking off again all night long. So next time when you plan to do the loop, don't do it. Don't drop anchor next to a train station, a stop station anyway. Here's some more shots as I was leaving that area. Now what we're doing here is we're actually heading up to Albany, New York. Right past Albany, New York is the Mohawk River, which meets runs into the Hudson River. We're going to go into the Mohawk River. And once we get in there, once you're in the Mohawk River, you're basically starting the Erie Canal trip. There is a lock on the Hudson River that you got to go through. And then right after that lock is the split on the Mohawk River. In the Mohawk River, you'll see the sign that says Erie Canal and an arrow pointing that direction. And that's actually when you start going through the locks and everything, and the elevation gets higher and higher. I think there is one lock that will lift you 40 feet, somewhere in the reference of 40 feet, like 39 or something like that. Here's another view of the rock formations and the mountains and everything else, and this is what impressed me. You know, I love seeing stuff like this. It's good. I mean, it just I know video doesn't do it any justice unless you're actually there and looking at it. It's amazing. It is just, I mean, fantastic, and that's why I did the trip. I wanted to see things I hadn't seen in a while, you know. But once again, where we're heading, like I said, we're heading to Albany, New York. Once we get there, just past Albany, we're going to go through a lock. Once you go through that lock, we're going to go into the Mohawk River, and that's where you actually start the Erie Canal, the signs. Now, it's not, I found out it's not all just the Erie Canal. There's other rivers involved in it, like the Mohawk River and some other rivers, that a combination of rivers that make the Erie Canal work. And the lock system, where every time you go through a lock, it just picks you up in elevation, and it keeps taking you up, up, and up, when all of a sudden you've gone up so high that these mountain ranges are no longer there because you're up there. That's how high these things are. From my understanding, I think it's somewhere in the reference of 475 feet in elevation to 500 and some odd feet in elevation is what you're going to go up in when you're doing the Great Loop here. And some of the locks, you know, I haven't gone through one yet, but I've heard some of the locks can get kind of tricky. Basically with you know, the opening and closing of the locks. But I guess when I get there, I'm going to find out. Here was a little interesting little island that had it looked like a castle at one time or another. I try to get as close as I can to it, but the water started getting shallow, so I couldn't actually go all the way up to it. Although there was some docks there, and I thought, well, you know, maybe I could, you know, if there's docks there, maybe somebody's gotten in there. But I didn't know how to get in there, so I just figured, okay, well, I'll get as close as I can and just film it that way. And like I said, it was just an interesting little building, an old building that looked like a castle. Maybe somebody had converted it into a warehouse or a company, or, you know, something. But it was pretty interesting. Some of the walls had already fallen off, had come down already. They were using some big poles to hold up one of the walls, I guess, because that looked like it was getting ready to come down also. But all in all, like I said, it's just something interesting to watch. So we decided to come in as close as we could, then we turned around and decided to go on out before we hit bottom or something. And like I said, here the bottom has rocks, so I'm very leery of getting out of the channel when it comes to getting out of the channel to do something like this, mainly because I don't know, you know, I'm afraid if I hit a rock or something, I could seriously damage the lower unit on the motor. that would get expensive if I had to put any lower unit there. But anyway, interesting little thing. And you can see the big, large rock formation just to the right of it also here, as I'm turning to get away and going back into that. This was reading right at about 4 feet. So turning around, and I'm trying to go out the same way I came in. That red marker out there, that's where I need to get to. That's the channel again. I can pick up the channel there, and it's deep once I get to it. So I went ahead and kept going up the river, and thinking, well, my best bet is to just keep going and get into Albany. Once I'm in Albany, then you can kind of consider done with the Hudson River and kind of done with New York and all of that, and into the Erie Canal, where the Erie Canal, somebody said in reference of 300 and some odd miles is what you're going to have to go through. And what you're doing is from Albany, New York, you're going from there, and then you're going to go into some major small towns, but some of the major towns is Rochester. You're going to go by Rochester. You're not actually going through the town of Rochester. You're just going to go by it. So Rochester is one of the big towns that you're going to go through. And then the other one, of course, is Buffalo, which is at the end, and that's at the Lake Erie. Buffalo, New York is right on Lake Erie and the Erie Canal. So once you get to Buffalo, you're no longer in the Erie Canal. You're going to be on the Lake Erie, which, like all the other lakes, all the lakes up there, so Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, Lake Michigan, they all can be pretty rough if you don't check the weather before you leave. So I'm gonna make sure exactly know where I'm going, where I have to be, how to get out of if the weather turns on me and I have to get in somewhere. I'm going to hug the coastline again and be able to get into a little canal or a little river, a little creek, a little cove, just something to keep all that, the bad weather from hitting me directly. And then once I've done that, as long as I think, in my opinion, now, a lot of people say, well, you just have to watch your weather. And that's true. I mean, and that's true anywhere, on anything. When you're on a boat or something like that, that's the first thing you got to do. Is you got to check your weather before you leave in the morning. If it looks like it's going to be bad, don't leave. I don't. There's been times when I've spent 3 or 4 nights, at a marina or at an anchor or somewhere, or wherever I had to go, even a state park if I have to, just to be able to weather out the rain or the storm or the wind or whatever's coming. You have to be able to protect yourself at those times. And when you make a trip like this, you don't have a schedule, don't have a deadline to be somewhere. Don't promise you're going to meet somebody somewhere at a particular time, because there's no way you knowing whether you're going to be there or not. And like I said, I've had situations where I put up somewhere or tied up at a dock, and I stayed 2 or 3 days there because the weather just wasn't right. And if you have to do that pretty often, you're going to find out yourself that you're not traveling the way you want to travel. I travel normally 35 miles a day. Sometimes do a little bit more, sometimes do a little bit less. But it all depends on if I find a good place to stay for the night. There are some places where you can tie up overnight and then wake up in the morning, get get your breakfast and whatever you're going to do in the morning, untie or lift anchor, and off you go, and take off again. So there's a lot of that has to do with, not having a schedule, basically. Here was some things that I happened to notice while I was going by. I found like 3 or 4 of these things, and it looks like somebody's been keeping up with them. This one here, I got close enough that I could read. I think it said like 1831 or something like that. I got close enough where I could read that on the top. It's got the year, I guess it was put up, and there are lighthouses, and they're pretty impressive, pretty little impressive lighthouses. I saw about 3 or 4 of them. They all look kind of different, and again, I try to get as close as I can to them, but some of them, there's rock formations around them and stuff like that, and there are signs that say warning, stay, keep out, rocky area. So, and that's why they have lighthouses, basically to warn, sailors as they were coming in at night to stay away. The light would kind of guide you in there, but once you got there, stay away from the light because it's a rocky area or shallow ground, and you would run aground there. So that's why these little things, these little lighthouses were put up. That was before we had a GPS system, and before we have an intercoastal, before we had channel markers and everything else. Before channel markers, it was hard to navigate. You had to be. It wasn't like, well, you do this and you do that. No, your specific job was to navigate and make sure you didn't run that boat aground. They call them as a navigator. Their job was, because you're talking about these huge ships coming through here, and if one of them happens to run aground, it creates a lot of problems. Not only does it plug up the channel where other boats can't come through, but also now you've got a problem is how do you get it off the ground, where it's sitting, or did you run it aground, hit a rock, and now you got a hole in your hull. But these are very nice, interesting lighthouses, like I said. And I tried to get again as close as I could, but couldn't get too close enough to where I could kind of look into them and see what they look like in there. But that's okay. That's the fun part of spontaneous. It just happens that I happened to see it while I was going by, so I took a picture of it. Why not? And then again, here's the you can see the water, how smooth it is, and even though the winds are blowing a little bit, you don't see that chop underwater. It's nice and calm, and I have a funny feeling that's going to be most of the way from now on, at least all the way till you get up to the lakes. When you get into the lakes, I don't know. I haven't I've never been on them, so I've just heard stories, and I did kind of read up on them too. That was my big concern is what do I do? Do I actually go across the Great Lakes, or do I hug the coastline, going across? So I wasn't sure what I was going to do, so I figured, well, I guess it's one of these. When I get there, I'll decide what I'm going to do, and I. By the time I get over there, closer, I talk to people by then, and I've asked, do you cross the lake or do you follow the coastline? My opinion right now is I'm going to hug the coastline. I don't want to go through any rough seas or rough weather in the middle of one of these lakes, because they are huge lakes, and they've actually created more storms and created havoc on boats than any other place because of the lakes themselves. But anyway, here I finally made it to Albany, and this is the Albany Yacht Club. If you ever happen to be coming by here, it's a good place to stop. It's a nice little marina. I think it was $2 per foot for overnight stay. They had the best price since I've been on the Intercoastal. Since I started the trip, this was the place that had the best price on fuel. It was $4.98, I think. That was the cheapest gas I put since I left Tampa, Florida. Here was a ship that was kind of painted kind of weird. From a distance, you can't tell what it is. You have to actually come up pretty close to it to realize this is a Navy ship. It looks like one of those little destroyers. Now, I left Albany, and here I am coming in. I'm still in the Hudson River here, okay? I'm not really on the Erie Canal yet. This is a lock. It's a federal lock, according to the lockmaster. He told me, yeah, this is not a regular, this is not part of the Erie Canal, because this is a federal lock, and it's I guess maintained by the federal government or whatever, but it wasn't part of the Erie Canal system. The Erie Canal actually starts when you go on Lake, from Mohawk River is where they actually start those locks, and they start raising the elevation underwater. And I think, if I wasn't mistaken, when I looked at a chart of where all the locks are, which they give you, if you're gonna, there's a lot of places you can pick up this chart, and it tells you all about the lock systems, what to do, and how to go through one of these. And I'm gonna record. I recorded one of these, going through one of these locks here. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to erase the volume. I mean I'm not going to erase the audio, so you can actually hear me calling to the lock masters and explaining to them what I'm doing, where I want to go, and they're talking back to me at the same time, telling me, because they want certain information from you going through this thing. And you can see here, you can see the water line up there. That's how high they're going to raise me here. And I didn't want to bore you with sitting there for almost 35 minutes while the water's filling up. So I went ahead and cut some of it out just to show you that, how the system is working and everything. But from my understanding, there's the second lock that you go through. That is the highest lock. It used to be the highest lock in the world. There was no other lock that would lift a boat more than up to 40 feet or something in the reference of 40 feet. It turned out that there was another lock built somewhere in Europe, and it raised you something in the reference of 10 inches more than this one did. So this one was no longer the highest or the deepest lock. And then a few years after that, somebody built another one in China that was also a few inches taller than the other one. So the one here on the Erie Canal system is now said it's number 3, and we're only talking about inches as far as the depth that it brings somebody up. So it's going to be pretty cool to go through that lock, because it's when you're talking about 40 feet raising, it's going to raise your boat up 40 feet. That's pretty impressive. And now these locks here have these lines. I don't know if you can actually see them, but they have these lines every so many feet. And what you do is, when you bring your boat up into the channel, you grab one of these lines, depending on how far up you go. You grab this line and you hold on to that line, and that keeps your boat from going forward or reverse. And I normally shut my engine off and I just hold on to the line. It's not bad, because as the water is coming up, all you're basically doing is just following the line up, just to make sure that your boat doesn't float away. But it's really not. The current, it doesn't really create a current of any kind, because the water comes. It looks like it's coming from the bottom. They don't like open one gate or close another gate and then open a gate and let all the water come in. No, it looks like they built some kind of tunnel and system or something underneath the canal, and that's where the water comes from. It coming from the bottom of the canal, so it's evenly just being distributed all along the canal. So your boat basically starts floating up, and it doesn't push your boat forward or reverse or anything. It kind of keeps it in place. The only reason you hold on to the line is just to make sure that, in case there is a current. Now here they are where they've opened up the gates, and now we're going through. So our next stop then is going to be the Erie Canal then, what I want to try and do is try and record going through one of the lots, and I'm not going to erase the audio on it and write or speak over it, so that you can actually hear what goes on when you go through one of these locks here. Nothing, no big deal, but at least you'll have an idea of, okay, what do you expect, or what do they expect, what do you have to do when you go through one of these canals. Not a big deal, but you might want to hear it. Some of you might want to know what you do, what you say, but it's fairly simple. The best part, the only thing I did notice is, while you're going through these things here, is that if you're behind a big boat and you're the smaller boat, and they don't turn their engines off and they're using their engines to kind of stay where they're at, well, you have to realize that every time they reverse one of their engines or forward one of their engines, all that water is being shot at you because you're the one behind. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. This is the end of it.